Hi, it's me, Kaity.
And me, Adriane.
And you're listening to KindlED,
a podcast where we dig into the science behind building relationships and environments that help kids unlock their full potential and become empowered learners.
Together, we'll discover evidence-based tools and methods that will empower you to kindle the curiosity, motivation, and well-being of the young people in your life.
Welcome to KindlED. Hey, Kaity, how's it going today?
So good. How are you?
I am feeling elated. I'm feeling joyful. I'm really working on being specific with my feelings instead of just saying, oh, I'm good.
That's a good tip. Yeah, I love that. Cool. Well, in that spirit, I'm feeling very Mario today.
Very Mario. What does that mean? Please tease that out.
I'm kidding. It's not a feeling. You'll not find that on the permission to feel feelings chart for sure. No, we just saw the Mario movie. So we've been talking about Mario at our house.
Very cool. Did you guys enjoy it?
Yeah, it was good. I liked it. I grew up playing a lot of video games. Everyone has different feelings about video games, and some people love it and some people don't respond well to it, and some people it can be addictive. So I have personally created a home where we don't do a lot of video games. And so my kids, we were playing the other day, I can't remember where we were or something, but we were playing like Super Mario Brothers 3, old classic Nintendo style. And they were like really struggling with it. I'm like, oh man, yeah, we don't do this. So you're not good at video games. It's not like a skill we're cultivating in our house, although it's fun. And so I actually had cultivated that skill when I was little, and I've got some pretty mean Super Mario Brothers 3 skills. And I got on there and I was like whipping around, showing them all the tricks. And like, it's crazy how much my brain remembers like all of the muscle memory of like where all the secrets are. And like within the first few levels, I got us like 3 different whistles and we were like warping to different, and they just thought I was like the coolest. And they're like, who are you? Like, you're always like the video, like, all these things, and talking about screens and all of it. So I'm just like, I feel all of these things about video games because I grew up playing a lot of them, and I know the dark side of Mario. Just kidding. I love Mario, actually. I think it's such a fun world for kids.
I think it is a really fun world, and I think we would be a completely zero video game family. I have personal feelings that probably echo yours, but I do have one kid who's just loves it. I mean, I brought it up multiple times, and so he gets a very small amount, but it is so important to him, and he explains how he's able to escape into this other world, and he's able to control it, and it makes him feel good. So I am trying to see the positives of it. Mm-hmm. And so in the Mario movie, we actually went and saw it for his birthday party. We booked all these seats in the theater and had all these kids dropped off. And there were only a few of us adults. It was super fun. I didn't lose any kids. We did it. We made it through.
That's amazing.
What I was thinking about, though, especially that ties into this, is in the Mario movie, there's a stark difference between the human world and the Mario world. Mm-hmm. Gravity works differently. Turtles behave differently. It's kind of like, I think why there's such a pull for my son is because it's not reality to him sometimes is really, really hard. And it doesn't feel good to be in his skin sometimes. So he loves to escape in this other world. So what we're going to talk about today is the world that we create for kids. Mm-hmm. Kaity, you've thought about this a lot in helping create Prenda. So I would love to hear what you have to say about this world that we're creating for kids, especially in the education environment.
Yeah, for sure. My thoughts on this kind of go back to the beginning of Prenda, maybe 2018-ish. I found this TED Talk by Mark Rober. We're big Mark Rober fans at our house. And this TED Talk he gave is actually called The Super Mario Effect. And in this talk, he goes through this study that he did where he coded a computer game and then asked all of his followers to play it. And then there were 2 versions of the computer game. One in which when you messed up, you got a message that said that you had failed and that it deducted points from you. And then other people who played the same game but got a different message and there was no points deduction for failure. And so what they saw is that the people that got the message that that didn't deduct points. There was no like punishment for failure. They actually ended up trying more times and then succeeding more times. And so what that taught him was that like the mechanics of learning make a big difference in the long-term success and people's willingness to try. And so I thought, oh my gosh, this is exactly what we're trying to do with Prenda. And I sent it to Kelly, our founder, and he was like, yeah, Mark Rober and I are friends. And me and Andy, one of our other like early Prenda team members, actually coded that game and were like part of this. I'm like, wow, that was really surprising to me. So love Mark Rober, love that TED Talk, love that Prenda was involved in creating that study too. Going back to Mario and just thinking about these different worlds, like if you think about when you're playing Mario, if you see a flower, you walk up to it and expect it to like give you these fire powers. Or if you walk up to a turtle, you expect it to make you smaller or kill you, right? If you see a pipe, you have this expectation that like you could go down that pipe. And in the normal world, like these are not logical strategies to apply in the real world, right? But because we live in the Mario world, like all of those things, we have lots of evidence that these things are effective and that they do work. That's how we learn that they're effective strategies. So we repeat them. And so then I was thinking, wow, that is a lot like school, right? We have created this world for kids where there are incentives and punishments and rewards and cultures that end up pushing them to behave in certain ways. And then as adults, we look at these behaviors that are coming out of our kids as a product of the world that we've created for them. And we don't like all of the behaviors, right? Do you notice this?
Yeah. And what I think of as well as this world that we've created is not even how things work in the real world either. Even little things like age segregation and things like that. And you can see how a lot less than great kid behavior is really a reaction to the world of school. Akilah Richards, she writes a book called Raising Free Children or something like that. And the language she uses is schoolish. It's like all these things that we've learned because they were schoolish. There's high pressure on academic performance, so it's logical to cheat. There's a feeling of really feeling just powerless, which basically is inviting kids to bully. There's also with like the age segregation is something that I recently read in an article was this creates an environment of competition because everyone's the same age. Whereas if you're in an environment where there's multiple ages, you're not going to expect, say you're 7 and you're in a classroom with a 4 or 5-year-old, you're not going to have the same expectations and it's going to create less competition. Or if you need me to get an A, it makes sense to avoid challenges and do the bare minimum just to get that grade. And it really creates this fixed mindset.
So would you say that world is working for kids, like the little world that we created for them? Do we like the results of that?
It depends on what you say by working. For some people, working means compliance and obedience. And I use the phrase fitting inside the box. So if that is the goal, which back to episode number 2, we talk about like what is our role and goal in a child's life. That's not our role and goal. So then no, it's not working. So it just really depends on, I think, the paradigm and the mindset of the adult in charge when they're looking at, is it working or is it not working? To put some numbers out there, here are some statistics. 42% of high school kids say that they experience persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness. 10% of, I know it makes my heart sad too, and I know so many kids are suffering from depression and anxiety, and 10% of high schoolers have attempted suicide. This comes from the CDC Youth Risk Behavior Survey. 95% of high schoolers admitted to cheating in some way. There were 70,000 kids in this survey.
Oh my gosh.
Have you ever cheated?
You're asking me that right now.
I am asking you that right now. Have you ever cheated in school?
Actually, testing center at college, I was like, I was the proctor that we'd send people in to like, if we thought someone was cheating, we would like send in a fake student test taker to like sit behind them and like take their test away. Like I was part of the testing police essentially. But I did when I was in high school, I would totally copy Spanish homework. I'll admit it.
In second grade, I have one memory of cheating because I was such a rule follower. I was very I'm guessing we are very similar. And in second grade, I cheated and I forgot to put my name on my paper. And another kid forgot to put his name on the paper. And so he got up to the front of the classroom before I did. And of course, he took the paper that had 100%, which was mine. But I knew that it was mine because I had cheated on that one problem. So it totally bit me in the butt. And I ended up deciding cheating was not my thing.
Yeah. Well, good.
So more statistics. We have 20% of kids are being bullied. And this comes from the National Center for Educational Statistics. Engagement drops the more you are in school. So fifth grade, it's at 74%. And by 12th grade, it falls to 34% of kids saying that they are engaged in learning at school. And I know creativity too. They call it like the fifth grade slump or fourth grade slump. By that time, just creativity starts to wean as well.
Yeah. So if you look at the world we've created for them, like these are actually really predictable results because we're actually incentivizing the behaviors that land you as one of these statistics. And that's it's heartbreaking. And it's hard as an adult, especially like an educator, administrator, like a parent who has helped kind of create this world. I mean, I think most people feel like they've inherited this world, right? The world of school has been the same for a long time. And we've just kind of like gone with it. And I want to go back to Mario for a second because Mario is the way that it is for a specific reason, right? The turtles kill you, gravity works a certain way because the game designers believed a certain thing. They thought, oh, it'll be hilarious if the turtles are actually very dangerous, or if these mushrooms are the bad guys, right? It'll be funny and it will be challenging and kids will like it. If they didn't think those things, they would have created a world that operated very differently, right? So it's really the game designers' beliefs that are driving what they create. And so then I just was thinking about that and realizing that it's our beliefs that we have about kids and about what they should be doing and what's good for them that kind of drive the creation of the world that we make for them. And I've just been doing a lot of thinking about like, what are those beliefs? What are like the underlying beliefs that get us to these statistics?
Even to back up a little bit, I think about, well, what beliefs did adults have about us when we were kids and developing into adults? One belief that seems pervasive is merit-based approval or acceptance. We feel like we have to withhold our acceptance and pride in our kids and students until they have achieved, until they got that Principal's Pride Award, or until they got on honor roll or super honor roll, or what are all the different levels and things that we have. Another belief is like this conditional relationship, which is basically the opposite of unconditional positive regards. So we care more about the performance and the behavior. I don't think this is intentional. We don't mean to only care about the behavior, but if you step back and go, oh, wow, I only gave him love and support and kindness and attention whenever he was getting straight A's or whenever he was performing in a certain way.
Yeah, that's spot on. It is so unintentional, but it's like where we put our attention, where we're feeling unconditional love. And like, of course, my love is not conditional based on your grades or whatever, but kids perceive it that way because we give like positive energy when there's success, and then we feel disappointed, or we convey disappointment or disapproval when there's struggle. And so kids perceive that as, wow, like I'm less valuable in the eyes of my parent or my teacher when I struggle. So then struggling becomes very risky. And that leads us to all of these behaviors. Like if it's not okay for me to bring home a C, even if that's like the level of my understanding, then I'm motivated to get the A any way I can, right? So that would lead me to cheating or choosing out of a challenge, which we'll talk about more about later. So we kind of have this societal norm that when you're only valuable if you're right and if you're well behaved. So we kind of accidentally use our relationships to push kids towards rightness and compliance because that's convenient for us. That makes them a good kid. But unintentionally, we're kind of creating a world for them where their struggle and their normal, the struggles that they're just going to see in the normal course of development really are not okay. They're unsafe for the child because they can sense that it affects the relationship. And then it's ironic. We've been talking a lot about the nervous system. The brain is super attuned to this relationship, both parent and teacher, coach, whatever it is. The child is attuned to that, to see like, am I kind of in the good graces of this adult figure that I am reliant on and depending on for survival, essentially. Like this person is responsible for bringing me up.
The internal safety.
Okay. Yeah, internal safety. So that when there's a risk there, we go into our sympathetic nervous systems, and that actually turns off our prefrontal cortex axis, which makes it even more likely that you will struggle to behave and struggle to think and struggle to perform, which then will get you more disconnection from the adults in your life, which will, it's just this cycle that we've talked about before, but it leads to a lot of anxiety and like poor mental health, honestly.
It really does. So what would you say is the solution here?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm sure there's not just one solution, right? It's going to be a myriad of things. But for one thing, we need to really focus on destigmatizing that struggle and misbehavior is just a normal part of development. And that means that as adults, we're going to have to learn what normal development looks like and what normal misbehavior looks like. So saying things like, you're having a hard time understanding this idea about fractions, say, that's frustrating for you because I know you want to learn the fractions. I know you want to understand it. So you're trying to praise their positive intent. I can destigmatize that for them by saying like, great news. It is totally normal and fine for this idea to be kind of hard to understand. Like most kids don't get this right away. And it's actually better for your brain to struggle with this than it is for you to just immediately get it, because this is making your problem-solving centers of your brain like stronger. And they've done really good research that shows that the long-term benefit to your learning of struggling with something and then getting it actually results in a deeper level of learning than if you were given the answer right away or weren't given the opportunity to really sit in that struggle.
I hear you saying that basically validating the feelings, destigmatizing that feeling, but also allowing them to sit in that, which I feel like is so powerful. It can really help them develop the things that we want them to develop, resilience and grit and the ability to push through than just to give up in their failure.
Yeah, totally. I also think though that sometimes we can use this language of safety and like wanting to like affirm kids in their struggle and like kind of take that too far almost to say we should never demand anything of a child or like we have to get rid of the concept of like right answers because that would be demoralizing to get a wrong answer. And it's so the opposite of that. Like, I don't think that that's really true. Kids like struggle. They want to see themselves as learners, but they need that high expectation and that invitation to mastery and our competence or our confidence in them to say, look, this is hard and this is challenging and you can, and I'm here with you to support you in this, but I'm not going to change this standard. I'm not just going to make it easier so you feel like you're winning. That's not what we're saying. That's not the message of finding internal safety. It's that despite the fact that there's a really hard mountain out in the world to climb here, fractions, whatever it is, like you're not alone. And you can do it. I have confidence and there's a path forward, but we're not going to give up on the mountain. And so I think that sometimes we get like kind of a little too pendulum-y in this, where it's like either we just have to have high standards for kids and they just have to deal with it and learn the hard way, or we have to move the standards so everyone feels nice and cozy. And it's like, no, there's a middle ground where we maintain relationships and don't create this world where kids feel like they're fighting tooth and nail for our approval and acceptance and love, because that's what their survival brains want to do. We need to stop pitting those things against each other. We can have high standards, we can invite them into excellence, and we can still provide a high level of support for them in those moments.
I think it's also important that we help our kids make sense of what they're feeling or what is going on for them through that struggle, because it makes me think of Dr. Dan Siegel talks about this a lot, is when a toddler, say, falls down, what does a parent usually say? You're okay, you're okay. And he's like, but they're not okay. So it's really confusing to the brain because it's like, and that can actually cause them to be even more disengaged and more disconnected, to their nervous system, because it's like, but I'm actually not okay. So a better phrase would be, I see that you're hurt. I see that you're struggling right now. It's the same with like struggles and something that's hard, is that we're helping them make sense of those feelings inside their body. So then they can have access to their prefrontal cortex. And that's where the learning really happens, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the idea of a toddler, like a baby, learning to walk for this, because I love that slight language shift to like focus on what's happening to them, to like validate them. What we don't do ever is be like, you fell down. I can't believe you fell down. Like, we do not get mad at a baby who falls down learning to walk, because we know that learning to walk is falling down as part of the normal developmental sequence of learning to walk. And that it's through all of those failures and falls that they'll eventually develop the coordination and the muscle to do it right. Same thing with talking. We don't get mad at a 6-month-old baby for not being able to express themselves. But as soon as these kids are a little bit older, we suddenly have
do get mad.
Yeah, we do get mad.
We do.
Like, and
we correct it. And
for sure. I was even mad. Like my daughter yesterday just had one of those days where she was just getting hurt a lot. And I was like, instead of being like, oh man, you're struggling, like, why don't we go do something that is like calming to you, or like, I don't know, something helpful.
In a padded room where you cannot hurt yourself.
Yeah. I was just like, in my brain, like mad at her for getting hurt so much. I'm like, this is not like, she's learning how to use her body. She's out there playing rough. She's like, getting into it, and that's good for her. I should be like, yeah, you are like struggling out there and you're hanging tough and you are like getting into things and climbing trees and doing all this awesome stuff. But instead I was like bugged. Like, just stop getting hurt. I'm sure that if she could stop getting hurt, that she would prefer to not get hurt. Right. But in my tired, overwhelmed state, whatever, I was just like bugged. And so not my best parenting moment, but we get there and that's okay. Self-compassion, deep breaths. I'll do better today and tomorrow.
We want to shift our belief from the quickest way to the right answer and good behavior is best. And it's holding kids to these really high and unrealistic expectations, but they require me to withhold my approval. If they don't meet these standards, if they don't meet these expectations that I have, which, like I said, are very unrealistic, then I'm not going to give them approval. I'm not going to give them love or connection or whatever that they need, especially in those moments. And we want to change it to something like struggle and misbehavior are a normal part of the developmental process, and young people need my approval and warmth regardless of their achievements or their behavior. Mm-hmm. I love looking at behavior and these kinds of things as, there's a lagging skill here. Yeah, they just need my support and my help to be able to develop those neural circuits and neural pathways to be able to behave in these ways that would make life a little easier. Mm-hmm. When we create learning environments based on this new belief, this expansive belief, kids are more likely to develop a strategy of repeated trying, handling struggle without frustration, and they start to really take ownership over their learning. And this is the key, especially with what's going on in the world right now, is they can do this with lower levels of anxiety and stress, because what's happening is their brains are just getting flooded with these stress hormones. Mm-hmm. And the more they stay in this chronic state of stress, the harder it is to access the higher levels of thinking, the higher levels of brain development, because the cortisol and adrenaline are just flooded and it prevents it from. So we can do this simply by just changing our beliefs.
Totally. I couldn't agree more. Okay. So the next belief that I think is really important that we start shifting is that our learning model of traditional education assumes kind of like a linear path for learning and that everyone needs to learn the same thing at the same time. You can kind of see this like in Ken Robinson's famous TED Talk. He talks about the factory model system, moving kids along. I think like the best phrase to describe this is it's like a one size fits all approach, right? And so if we believe that about learning and then we create a world that facilitates that, then when there's anything that's off, like, oh, you're behind or you're not getting this or we need to move on and you don't understand this yet, that creates a world for kids where they start feeling like, oh, like if I have a question, there's no time probably to answer my question because we've got a curriculum schedule and we've just got to keep on this path. Or if I'm interested in something else and want to like do a deep dive into something that's I'm like becoming very interested in, we have to correct that. We're seeing that curiosity as something that needs to be corrected and we kind of try to bring kids back on task, onto what our task is, instead of creating a world where we could better facilitate different paces and different styles of learning and then different interests and passions, right? Because we have this mentality of one size fits all, or we're just like on a train track where we got to just keep the schedule, that makes it so kids kind of have to sit back and go along for the ride. It creates a very passive learner instead of an active, engaged learner.
And what was coming up for me a lot was this very limiting belief that probably gets created in kids of I don't matter. And so instead of believing that learning has to be so rigid and controlled, we could accept that humans learn in different ways and at different paces. A system built on the idea of personal mastery and personal inquiry would lead kids to persist in the face of challenge more, to keep asking their questions, to think deeper, to trust themselves. And I feel like even just show up in this deeper connected way, because if they feel, all of this leads to that feeling like they matter, feeling like they're seen, that they're heard. They have this freedom inside of themselves to behave in ways that feels good to their bodies. I had a friend who reached out to me because she's like, okay, my son's in kindergarten and he's making all these animal noises and the teacher doesn't know what to do with it. And I told her, I said, isn't that incredible though? Like he knows his body needs that in that moment. He's becoming dysregulated, so he's making animal noises, tapping into some play, which we've been talking about, to regulate himself. Yes, it's disruptive in the classroom. I wonder if there's a way that he can go out in the hallway and quack like a duck, or get it out of his body. So kids know what they need and we suppress so much of this. So it makes sense to me of why behaviors are so big and depression is so high and anxiety is so high, because we're not allowing kids to have this freedom within their bodies and their minds and their souls to learn in ways that are very conducive to healthy brain development.
Yeah. And this goes back to the world we're creating, right? Like in that example you just gave, we created a world that didn't account for the normal developmental need for a very small child to move and make noise, right? So in the classroom setting, movement and noise making is outlawed, essentially. It's like the normal needs of your developmental sequence are not acknowledged in this world. So you have to learn to suppress them, or we'll punish you for whenever your normal developmental sequence behaviors pop up, right? So instead, shifting to a whole new world where like we're building in movement, we're welcoming that, we're learning through play, we're working with the normal developmental sequence instead of trying to fight it. I think that is kind of the root of a lot of these behavior issues, is that like, oh, we're not creating a world where kids' needs are met. And so naturally they're acting out and trying to get their needs met. That's a very logical strategy. Just like in Mario, if it's a very logical strategy for me to jump on top of a mushroom. Here in my normal life, there's no advantage to that. That's not a strategy we'd apply to. But in that world, it makes sense to do that. It makes sense. It made sense to that little kid to make some animal noises right then. It was logical for him.
Right. And the word that you said, I think is really powerful and interesting in applying to this is with. So it's like we're teaching with, we're guiding with, we're parenting with, instead of this power over. It's more of this empowerment.
Yeah. So in summary, the second shift we want to make is to get away from rigid, linear, like one size fits all thinking and assume that all of the kids that we're trying to help have a normal developmental sequence in their brain and in their bodies. And we want to work with that by creating educational pathways that can accommodate for different paces. Like you'll see the term mastery-based learning thrown around. It's what we do at Prenda, where you can go at your own pace and not move on until you're ready. That's one key element here. And then personal inquiry, building educational systems that rely on that and that run on that curiosity and encourage it instead of seeing it as like a distraction or something that needs to be corrected. So it's just like stepping back and wrapping your arms around what is instead of like rejecting what is for what you think should be, even though what we think should be is very counter to like what's normal and what's healthy development. That's kind of how I'd summarize this shift that we should make.
Exactly. And so when we focus on personalization, mastery, and inquiry, we see kids who are more engaged in their learning.
Yeah.
The last belief we wanted to bring up is the idea that letting kids make decisions is dangerous and risky, and that whoever has the most experience should make the most important choices because we know better.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we do know a lot more than kids. And there is this concept of like relying on a more knowledgeable other. That's a Lev Vygotsky term, which is wise, right? But we can do that. We can set up a world where kids have access to that mentorship without completely feeling like they are out of control and that they can't be trusted, essentially. Like the system that we have now and the typical way we go about parenting assumes that the child can't be trusted. Do you feel like that's true? Do you see that?
Absolutely. I was reading Gather Hunt's Parent, and she goes into is a Hadzabe. It's in Ethiopia. It's a indigenous community. And she said littles, like little people, little humans, 2, 3 are just out in the wild, and there is real danger. There's tigers and lions, and she just was blown away that it just seemed like they were just out on their own. She said, but there was always an adult in a bush or adult, like there was always someone watching, but they value this ability to figure things out. And if a child gets hurt, they pick themselves back up. But if they need an adult, that adult is there. Because she said that they even treated her like that. She's like running after them. They were like going after a lion or some kind of animal. And she just felt so alone and afraid and scared. And she said, but then adults later like knew what she was doing the whole time. She's like, where were you? I didn't even know where you were. So it's really interesting because I feel like there is a lot of power in that. Yes, we do know better. We have lived longer. However, how can our kids learn and develop and grow if they're not given the opportunity to? So what happens is when we believe these ideas, we tend to create systems and environments where students experience a lot of adult intervention when they have to make a decision or solve a problem, which this honestly can lead to feeling incapable and passively, basically waiting for other people to make things happen for you. Something you hear a lot is like, oh, Gen Z, or they just don't have this initiative, or I wonder why. And I'm not saying that for everybody. I don't agree with that. I feel like we need to speak positive about all generations. You see that a lot, though, and I feel like a lot of this is cultivated in these systems.
Yeah, exactly. There's a concept. I don't know if we've gone into it extensively here, so I'll kind of describe it, just the difference between an internal and an external locus of control. And so locus of control means like where's the action happening? Who is the agent of change in the environment? Is it you? That would be an internal locus of control. Or does it exist outside of you, an external locus of control? Are you the one driving your life, making the decisions confidently, competently, taking risks, like doing the thing? Or do you feel like your life and your circumstances are more or less a result of all the things that happen to you instead of what you do? And there's some really interesting research on this that shows that having an internal locus of control is tied to lower anxiety, better mental health, and actually higher academic achievement. And this is something we survey in our Prenda kids, and just creating a learning environment where kids have a high degree of choice and voice and feel like, yeah, it's obviously me that is either getting these results or not getting these results. And we're testing that and studying that mentality in our kids right now. And it's so interesting to see them make this shift. And hopefully, if enough of them can make the shift, then we'll also see academic growth and better mental health and wellness as well. It's a really important belief that we have as adults, that we assume that kids can and that kids want their lives to work out and that they want responsibility, instead of kids are lazy, kids can't do anything, kids will fail, kids
all these judgments.
Yeah, all of these things that they can't. And they almost become self-fulfilling prophecies, don't they? Like, have you ever, this has happened to me, this is embarrassing, but I almost, in my less great parenting and teaching modes, when I have a kid who's like overly confident, I'm almost like, I want that kid to fail. Like, I want that kid to realize that he needs me. Like, it's not a thought I'm proud of, but it has happened to me before, where I'm like, oh yeah, it's going to feel good in my nervous system when like I'm justified in that, like, oh, you thought you could do that by yourself, and you needed me to shave that apple for you, or like whatever. Like, what?
Because it gives you power and control,
Yeah.
probably because I'm going to guess you didn't have control and power as a child.
Yeah, totally. So giving our kids and our students the gift of trust. And actually, they talk about this in The Self-Driven Child. They go over this study with 9-year-olds. They ask 9-year-olds and 15-year-olds and 17-year-olds, and then professional clinical psychologists. They pitch them this scenario. It's like about this kid and like, what should you do? Like, what should you advise? And given enough information about a situation, the 9-year-old was able to look at this. 9-year-olds, there were many kids in the studies. A high percentage of those 9-year-olds were able to look at the situation and say essentially the same thing as the clinical psychologist would have said. It's like, they actually do have very good judgment when you trust them and give them the information they need. The goal is not to just have them figure everything out and just discover everything for themselves. It can be supported and guided, but we can support and guide in a way that doesn't communicate you can't and we don't trust you, right? Because then you get into this external locus of control, passivity, and the negative mental health effects of feeling like you don't control anything in your life, right?
And they may not have the language or be able to conceptualize this, but it's going to show up in their behavior. It's going to show up in their emotions. And so we really want to shift from thinking it's dangerous or risky to give kids ownership over their learning and their lives to believing that kids are capable. Just like you said, give them the benefit of the doubt that they can make good choices for themselves when they have the information, the context that they need, and that it's possible to share knowledge or give guidance without fully taking over. I mean, they still need us to scaffold. They still need us there, and that connection is really important. But we don't have to do it by making all the choices and decisions for them, because that actually can hinder their brain development to make these choices on their own.
Yes. And you look at how many kids graduate from high school or even graduate from college, and they're finally like off the train tracks. And it's like, I don't know how to handle myself out here in the wild west.
They're like, whoa, freedom! Let's blow stuff up.
They'll totally shut down. Like, you'll see different reactions, but it's like, they maybe got a really good SAT score, but they do not know how to like be an adult in the world and make decisions and manage their life independently, because we weren't giving them like micro opportunities to do that. And I've been thinking about this, like micro leadership examples, when like, how can I just, when we're making dinner with a 3-year-old or a 10-year-old, how can I hand over tasks? Like, what of all the things that I'm doing could be done by a child, and to give them a micro experience with building competency and confidence and control, and to be able to trust themselves to know, when I have a decision to make, I know how to think deeply. I know how to go seek out advice from more knowledgeable others. I know how to go to my teacher and my parent and be like, hey, this is like what I'm working with. What would you do in this situation? What have you seen other kids do? Like, to learn from others and not just be like, well, I'm just going to go figure it out by myself, which is one way to do it. And definitely with certain personality types, you'll see a lot of that. But there's a lot of scaffolding and support that we can give kids in decision-making that grows their competence and their confidence. and helps them trust themselves. And that is just such a powerful gift to give kids.
A big piece of what you just said, though, is to make sure that we're not bulldozing it or forcing them to cook or do, cut cucumbers, or it still needs to be something that they want to do. We typically have house cleaners, and they skipped this week. So that means we go 4 weeks instead of 2 weeks. And so I'm going to have to actually clean my house. And I don't clean. I try. I don't make it a priority. I'm one of those people. And so my kids want it, like, hey, we notice the floors are dirty and we don't like stepping on the dirty floors. So they already know. They know where the cleaning supplies are. They know that they are allowed to pitch in to help, even if they're not going to do it the same. I mean, they probably, to be honest, they will probably do a much better job than I will. Yeah. But we've created this environment in our house where they don't have to ask to do everything. And if they want to pitch in, and we have lots of little mantras and phrases, like, what do we do in this family? We help each other out. And we have lots of little things. The one was, what do we do in this family? And it was like, we're problem solvers. But my son, I think he was like 4 or 5, and he goes, we're solutioners. So now we say that, like, what are we? We're solutioners. So
I love that. That's great. So just to wrap things up, your beliefs are important as an adult because you create worlds and families and cultures and classrooms and teams out of what you believe. And so there are probably many other beliefs out there that could be adjusted so that we can have better trickle-down effects and outcomes with our kids. But the 3 we've talked today about the most are providing unconditional positive regard or connection, prioritizing personalization, like mastery and inquiry, and then providing opportunities for kids to experience ownership and autonomy. And those are the 3 parts of self-determination theory, which has been proven time and time again to be kind of like the 3 main ingredients of what humans need to thrive. And we go through all of these extensively in episode 5, if you haven't listened to that, with Dr. Gina Riley. And it's just kind of like the foundation of like a very kindled lens on life, really. Like those are the principles that will come out time and time again. If you're kindling, if you want to kindle a kid's curiosity and motivation and well-being, all of those good things, those three principles are like the pillars of getting that done. And there's 1,000 right ways to implement all of those ideas. But it always kind of comes back to those 3 principles.
And our beliefs cultivate what our children believe, who eventually become adults. That just keeps going in these cycles. This was such a great conversation. I absolutely loved it. And let's move on to our questions. So Kaity, would you like to read our question from Dave?
Totally. Okay, so Dave asks, my 12-year-old son won't engage with the family much anymore. He used to be so fun and loved hanging out, but now he's despondent and won't really talk to me about anything. Help. Oh, that's hard. What do you think, Adriane?
Well, I don't know the situation. I don't know the 12-year-old, so it is a little hard. But I would, if this was happening, and this was happening, I have a 13-year-old son. He's a boy, and he just, they're not, the emotional connection in boy brains and girl brains it is different. And so I was noticing that, and I stepped back and just kind of assess, how much time is he spending with friends? How much time is he spending outside of the house? What kinds of things are we doing to make our time worthy of like the strong connection? How much am I talking to him? How many words am I throwing at him? And am I listening? And so I just kind of did a little assessment and just got curious. And I realized he was living at the park. And he was just around his friends, which is great. Like, we want them to have strong peer groups, and they're really good, great, amazing group of friends. And they all have really amazing parents that live all around the park. We just happen to live a few parks over. So our eyes aren't as much on there. So I just kind of was like looking at those kinds of things. Okay, why could this be? Do I show interest in his interests? He's into dirt bikes and jujitsu and flying planes. I don't do any of those things. So I just kind of sat down and was like, okay, how can I show interest in this? And I found Civil Air Patrol for him to join. And so he saw, oh, she's supporting this interest of mine. Or I show up at the last, 30 minutes or 20 minutes of jujitsu and just watch him and he looks. So it's, so just finding ways to connect. And especially for me, being a very loquacious female, just limiting my words with him and just being just present. Shoulder time is really important too.
Yeah, just being with. Yeah, so I would say that if he's feeling, that's the word that Dave uses, despondent and like just kind of shut down, we want to ask the question, like, where is he in his nervous system? Okay, so he's in dorsal vagal, and that means he's going to have more of this like slower processing. He's kind of closed down. He's not going to be open to a lot of like, hey, what's wrong? Hey, talk to me. Like he's not there where you can actually get to the root. So you have to come alongside him in that mode and kind of prove out that you are there no matter what, even if he won't talk to you about if there is an issue that he's not kind of being forthcoming about. Something has changed internally. If he's gone through something he doesn't know how to talk about and doesn't know how to bring it up to get help. Sometimes kids have like made a mistake and they're feeling a lot of guilt about it and they don't know like how to fix that, how to come to you. Or they feel like you're going to be mad at them. We just had a very real experience with that at our house, like with some lying that had happened. And the response was like, I just felt like you were going to be so mad. And that was keeping him in this corner of like being able to tell the truth. Really just coming alongside and being with, like Adriane's talking about, being interested in engaging before you would expect them to like be vulnerable with you, right? Because they're shut down. They're in their amygdala. They're not thinking rationally. They're not thinking like in a problem-solving way. They're just shut down. And so you kind of have to meet them where they're at first before you can get to that vulnerability and like maybe discover the root cause of that. There's some pre-work that you have to do.
Yeah, and maybe revisit times where connection was strong and activities that you did together that were really fun and kind of that triggers the memory of this good feeling of whenever he was in social engagement, whenever he was in ventral state. And so that can kind of help him come back as well.
And remember that if he's in dorsal and you want him to come back into ventral, his social engagement, he's probably going to go through the sympathetic nervous system of fight or flight. So you might see some anger come out or some big feelings come out before he gets all the way back to his like normal, what we'd call his ventral state of being, where you'd want to see him happy and engaging and like his old self. Anything else you want to add there?
No, I think we're good. You want to announce the Spark Squad?
Yes. This week's Spark Squad nomination goes to Trina Jackson. Congratulations, Trina. Here is what someone wrote about you. Trina knows how to see past student behavior to the root cause. She sees a child's strengths first and focuses on what she can do to set kids up for success. Trina doesn't write kids off when they don't show up as their best selves. She sticks with them and implements a wide range of strategies until every child is heard, valued, and challenged. I love that. Thank you for all of your hard work, Trina. Amazing job. And thank you on behalf of your kids too. Even if they don't have the language to tell you how awesome you are, they are feeling that. So thank you. And congratulations. Welcome to the Spark Squad.
So that's it for today. We really hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to subscribe to KindlED wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a review, rate us, share your favorite episode on social media, and tag us at Prenda Learn. For more KindlED content, head on over to prenda.com/KindlED and subscribe to the KindlED newsletter.
Don't forget to email us your questions, your challenges, anything you want help with, and your Spark Squad nominations to podcast@prenda.com. Thanks for listening, and remember to keep kindling.